Okay, so here I have all the little cleats fitted, all 11 of them. I'm about to go through and glue each one in place. I'll just put a little glue on and basically rub them into place. So with many glue joins, if you just rub the two surfaces backwards and forwards a little, you basically air suction them in place. Especially when they fit very well and the two surfaces are mating really well. And that's actually how the two plates of a front and back of an instrument are fit together and glued as well. They're not necessarily clamped in joinery. A lot of sort of old joinery hands will know the idea of a rub joint, where you get the two surfaces really well fitting, you put them together, get the glue in between, you rub them together, and the glue basically pulls them together. It suctions them. So because I've fit these, that one there's locked in place really quickly. I've fit these with the sandpaper and scraping and everything else to get a really neat fit. It doesn't take much. I'll try and get them straight if I can. And they lock into place. I also have these little pieces of ebony which I can put over the top, and just with one clamp in the middle, the spring will sort of spring pressure them down. So probably put them on after, but they're not necessarily needed. The glue also being a water-based animal protein glue, hide glue. It soaks into each surface, the timber in each surface, and kind of locks it all together. It sort of pulls itself in. It's actually it's a great glue for a lot of reasons. This is a reasonably thick mix of glue. I use different thicknesses of glue for different procedures. Whoops, I forgot to take the markings off this. I generally just scratch the remaining carbon paper marks off them just to clean them up before the glue goes on. I find that they glue better without the carbon paper. But that gave you a bit of a look, I hope, maybe at how much coverage most of them have had with the carbon. Some of them were pretty much perfect. I couldn't have gotten better. Yeah, a little bit of a rub back and forward, and once the air is out of the way, they just suction in place. There goes number 8. And there's barely any need for any clamping on them or anything. Another one that locked down really quickly. After these are in place, I'll let them dry off, and then we'll trim them down. Probably, on there. It's actually one that I thought locked in well. It's moved a bit. I'll show you that probably soon. Okay, so here we have all the little cleats glued on. I've already started trimming a couple back, but I'll talk you through maybe the process of one. I've sharpened up a few tools. You want your tools really nice and sharp for this. I generally use the chisel to do these rather than the knife. I just find that the ability to get in with a chisel blade in around the angles and create a nice shape with it is a little easier than with what I find doing it with a knife. You do want to make sure that you're not sort of just chunking in and yeah, you need to be fairly careful and fine. It's very fine work. You don't want to take a great chunk out of the top plate with a heavy tool. Just zoom in a little. I don't like to leave them very thick, so I'll look to thin this down a fair way. Its strength largely comes from the grain orientation. And if you leave them too thick, they'll start to affect the sound and the harmonics of the plate. So you want to thin them down nicely and just try and form it. I try and form a nice sort of arched shape to them. Some people do like a peaked shape on there. There is you can do whatever you think looks nice. It's always nice when you take the top plate off an instrument and someone's done a really nice job of fitting cleats to the inside of the instrument. It's really nice to see when someone's taking care about their work. So I like to try to do the type of work that others will enjoy looking at in future, as well as just it's important to have some pride about what you're doing, and if it takes a little bit longer to do a nice job, then I think it's well worth it rather than rushing it. I suppose I say that because you do come across them where they can be quite quickly sort of roughed down and done really roughly. Almost just to the point of leaving them like this and then just taking a few quick chamfers off them and calling it done. So when you see work like that, I think maybe some people just don't realise the difference that it can make to really finish it nicely. So I'll run them down with a chisel like this. Sometimes I'll go over them with a fine 1200 grit sandpaper. Sometimes I just leave them straight as they cut off the chisel or the knife, because the cut timber is the cut grains leaves a really nice finish. Whereas sandpaper's a bit more polished, a bit more scratched rather than cut. So it sort of depends on how I feel at the time and how I think it's looking. You want to take them down nice and thin, I guess, so that they're not adding too much extra bulk or weight, but that they're providing adequate support to the crack. I just generally just do it by eye. And that's largely based on what I've seen others do that I've thought looks nice. Looking at ones that have been done by repairers like A.E. Smith and other famous sort of makers, and I think I saw some that I think Dolphin had done, which looked nice. But yeah, looking at sort of nice work of others and trying to emulate that is where I've come from. So that's almost the shape. I then need to turn it around and do the little shape on the other side. So there we have the final shape that I generally like to do on the cleats. There's a little arch to it with a cut sort of straight chamfer on each end. Sometimes I'll go through and just run them over with a little bit of 1200 grit sandpaper to clean them up, clean up some of this glue that's just soaked in around the timber a little with a little sandpaper or the scraper, just to finish the job off nicely. I will go through and do the remaining. So here are the finished cleats. I've given them a light sand as well, along with the surrounding areas, so they will provide a nice support to the underlying cracks. At the end of the day, that's also the final use of the supporting cast. I'm quite happy with the arching, the way the arching's come up. Otherwise, I may have put sandbags or warm wheat bags in the inside of the instrument here, sort of just put them in to help sort of press the instrument back into the correct shape if the arching hadn't gone back nicely. But that's gone back really nicely. So this top plate is now almost ready to go back onto the body of the instrument. Now I'll start the process of refitting the top plate back onto the body of the instrument. Just check that I'm happy with everything inside and start off with a dummy fit, pop it in place and check the varnish lines and marks on the underside of the top plate where it meets the ribs, and happy with that. I've mixed up a fresh lot of medium viscosity glue, which I'll start applying on the top and bottom blocks and extending out around the top third to half of the rib structure on each of the top and bottom bouts. This assists once the top is in place and I start gluing the rest of it. It just helps me meet the glue up. If the glue doesn't extend out from the blocks very far, it's very hard to get it to meet once the clamps are on. So just checking the fit and top
is in the right position. It's quite easy to see on the corners of the seabouts when it's in the right place, and I'll get a couple of clamps on around the bottom block. Just wipe some excess glue off with a rag there. And a couple of clamps with a little gentle pressure. Doesn't need to be extreme. You do need to work fairly quickly. The glue gels up within a few minutes, and you need to sort of have the whole process done probably within maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Just wiping glue off as I go each step of the way. The cleaner you can have the job at this point, the easier it is with cleanup afterwards. So once I've got clamps on each end, I just open the seam slightly with my left hand and work a little glue, making sure we get plenty around the corner blocks. And I pretty much glue up the whole of one side. I'll run glue into the whole of one side on a violin. I'll generally work smaller sections on a viola or cello or larger instrument, but a violin I can pretty much do one whole half in one hit. And then pop a couple of clamps next into each of the seabout corners. And just looking to get even pressure all the way around. These clamps I made up some 20 years ago when I was starting out my first few project instruments as I was learning. And to purchase a set of crack closing clamps for violin or viola from a company like Heridim, or there's various German companies that produce them. They're quite expensive though. At the time when I was starting, I think they were around 900 euros or 600 euros maybe for a set. And it was far beyond my means to purchase a set of sort of dedicated clamps at that price. So I made up a set using a broom handle. I cut into slices, drilled holes in, and then acquired some leather from a hide producing factory near where I lived, and that was just out of their scrap bin, with some all thread from the hardware store and screws and wing nuts for a few dollars, and cut them all up and assembled them, and they've done an excellent job for me over the years. I suppose one day when my YouTube channel is maybe going great guns, I'll invest the 1,500 euros or so that it costs to purchase a set of dedicated closing clamps, but in the meantime these still do a fabulous job. Again, just going along with the rag, cleaning any excess glue. I do try to be very careful when using these clamps. There isn't any protection on the all thread, so I try very, very consciously to keep the threaded portion of the clamp away from the varnished edge of the instrument. That is something where with the commercially made clamps, they have rubber protection on the threaded portion of the clamp. So that would be a consideration working with them, I've very much learnt to just be very careful with what I'm doing and be conscious of those sorts of things, but it is a reason that I would look to replace them. You can get rubber tubing, which you could use as well if you were looking to make some up. You could put some rubber tubing over the clamp. Just need to make sure it doesn't stop the two ends of the clamp from closing. Try to get the clamps fairly evenly spaced around the instrument, but leaving enough room to clean in between the clamps. They don't necessarily have to be side by side all the way around. We're not looking to squash the top plate back onto the instrument. It should fit down quite well, and the clamps are really just applying light pressure to hold it in place while the glue does its magic. Sometimes I'll adjust and move the clamps about as I go if I see that it's sitting better in one place than another. And I'm just putting on a larger clamp across the bottom block here, using a piece of cork just to apply a little more pressure on that block area. And once this is done, the top will be left to dry. I'll see you back shortly.